Once again, thanks for joining us. Holly Shields here, live from 𝐊𝐴𝐥𝐿 Studios in Sydney, and you're watching Travel Insights. Today is a very exciting day for the tourism sector, as well as travel enthusiasts all around the world. That's because the 27th of September marks World Tourism Day. And this year's theme is Tourism for Inclusive Growth. To celebrate, in this episode, we'll be checking out 4 things you can do to celebrate today, even if you're stuck at home. Then after that, stick around for an exclusive interview with UNWTO representative Marcelo Rizzi. The reason we're so thrilled to host Mr. Rizzi on the show today is because the UNWTO, that is the United Nations World Tourism Organization, actually founded World Tourism Day in 1980. So gear up for an incredible guest and an incredible interview right before we dive into the latest travel news from around the world, only on Travel Insights. Today is World Tourism Day, and although unfortunately a large part of the year has gone by under lockdowns and travel restrictions, it's not all bad news, because we've got the top 4 best ways for you to celebrate the day this year. So sit back, relax, and come along for the ride through our itinerary list only on this edition of Travel Insights. In the travel industry, virtual reality is turning out to be an interesting medium to capture tourist destinations in a unique and immersive way. In fact, that's first on our list. Kick off your World Tourism Day by enjoying the finer things in life. Why not take a virtual stroll at the National Gallery of Victoria and immerse yourself in the art and artifacts of the gallery? You can even tune in to one of the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra's performances and be dazzled by the works of Beethoven and Bach. Top off your cultured experience with a virtual tour of the Sydney Opera House as well. Number 2 on our list, celebrate World Tourism Day by learning a language. There's no better way to prepare for your future's travels with all this spare time at home than to practice a language. Even if you don't become anywhere near fluent, the basics of a foreign language will help you get around, and locals will appreciate your efforts. We all know how the French can be. There are plenty of language learning apps at your disposal to make the process a whole lot easier. In fact, some of them even allow you to make friends with people in other countries, which is great because there's no better way to learn a language than through natural conversation. The third way you can celebrate World Tourism Day this year might not be as fun, but why not take a moment to reflect on the responsibilities we have as tourists when traveling the world in this post-pandemic day and age? Start by embracing mindfulness through research and educating yourself on any existing regulations in place in the countries you want to visit. Remember to foster the expansion of the local industry by purchasing authentic and locally made souvenirs. Keep your trip sustainable by considering the environment around you, and set a high priority for your safety and sanitation by constantly checking your health and cleanliness. And finally, on this big day, extend your support for people in the tourism sector who will greatly appreciate it, since they've been pretty vulnerable recently. A lot of livelihoods depend on the industry, so think about doing them a favor by sharing and promoting the destinations in need. These small actions can help many in the tourism workforce through the struggles of the pandemic. Sometimes selfless actions are the best way to celebrate such an exceptional day. And that concludes our list of things to do on World Tourism Day this year. So stick with us to hear from a very special guest, the founders of this special day itself. Don't go anywhere. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Travel Insights. It's a pleasure to have you with us today on this very special occasion.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Holly, for having us.
Glad to have you. So let's talk World Tourism Day. First of all, some people may not be aware of it, even though it's been going for 3 decades now. If you had to explain it to them in a nutshell, what would you say about this special day?
Well, it's the observance, as you said. We've been celebrating it for decades. It was first declared in 1980, so way before everything we know as of life currently. So pre-WhatsApp, digital, what have you. But tourism has been around, and tourism has come of age in that time. Now, what this UN observance points at is to underscore the tourism is much more than meets the eye. Okay, so it's not about tourism for the sake of tourism, but it's to underscore the importance and the relevance of every sector, which touches really on every aspect of our lives. So tourism is much more than vacation. Vacations is the classical, the peak of the iceberg analogy that you see,
Right.
but to have those vacations, to be able to enjoy it, to offer it, and so on, you need a whole huge, big, large value chain, deep social footprint to make it happen. And this is what World Tourism Day reminds us of. And it's celebrated around the world. And this year we're in Africa, in Côte d'Ivoire or Ivory Coast, to some. The official celebration rotates from continent to continent, from region to region, as we call it in our UNWTO jargon. And this year it's Africa's turn.
That's interesting. So is this year focused on the whole African continent, or is it just the specific location you're in?
No, it's we rotate from year to year. So last year was the Americas. It was virtual, of course. I mean, COVID swept away everything. The year before it was East Asia. We were in India. The year before that, Europe. Next year, we're going to be in Bali. So we're traveling the world. Of course, it's a World Tourism Organization, so you have to be consistent with that. So yes, last time Africa hosted the celebration was exactly 6 years ago in Burkina Faso, and that 6 years before that, 2009, in Ghana. So it'll be another 6 years, 2027, when there's Africa's turn again to host the official celebration.
Right. Do you have any plans of stopping by Australia in the coming years?
Well, I hope so. At least we have two neighboring countries who are members of UNWTO. We have Vanuatu and Palau. So you pretty much have to go and travel through Australia if you want to reach those countries. We're very close with Australia. We have on the academic level, on the private sector level, membership of our organization. So we definitely hope that Australia is a stop along the path.
Definitely. I mean, that'd be really great to see, obviously, for all of us here. Now, I understand that every year you have a theme for World Tourism Day. Could you maybe explain this year's theme for us and what it means for you?
Tourism, exactly. I mean, it's tourism for inclusive growth, which is very much our UN jargon, but it makes a fair point. As many of your viewers might be aware, this week the General Assembly is happening in New York. So it's the first top-level United Nations level in-person meeting since the pandemic hit. And we have to see, based on what I explained before, the tourism goes beyond tourism as fitting into that theme, that thematic, and that narrative. The theme for this year's World Tourism Day is tourism for inclusive growth. Many of you might be familiar with the sentence with the expression, not to leave nobody behind. So we point at tourism's potential to be able to include as many people as possible. This is a core principle of the UN agenda, and UNWTO, as any other UN agency, operates within the blueprint of the so-called 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the Sustainable Development Goals. Many people hear about our UN acronyms, SDGs, it's 17 of them, and so on. So we see what tourism can really literally plug into those development goals and make the case for tourism, because well managed, it can be a sector that embraces people, communities, nature, etc.
Right. So it sounds like you're coming from a very ethical standpoint and trying to build an ethical and sustainable framework.
Yeah, there is. But ethics and sustainability is also good business. So, I mean, we're aware of the fact that tourism does not exist with its back turned to reality. The tourism sector cannot thrive if it doesn't open its arms, heart, minds, and all sorts of feelings, and take notice of what's happening, what's surrounding it. And we also see this in the change, if you like, from a more technical perspective, from consumer behavior. People care about the impact they have on the surroundings, on the environment, at a cultural level. As a tourist, you don't want to be secluded in a ghetto behind fenced walls and armed guards and whatever, having your little bubble. On the contrary, you really go out and experience other cultures. And there is a link, and this is the individual microeconomic link, if you like, to another culture, another reality you're experiencing, another culture reality. It doesn't necessarily have to be an international one, right? This also can apply to domestic tourism. We have many treasures within our own countries and regions, and I'm sure this applies as well to Australia, where this is a fact. So this is something we need to underscore. It's the ethical element, it's a sustainable element, it's something that involves everybody. It cannot exist without the collaboration between the public sector, the government, and the private sector, because otherwise anything that we would do within the UN and the World Tourism Organization would be just, of course, an intellectual exercise, but we need to sink it down into reality. And this is where tourism can really fill those gaps, which many times are left behind: the gender gap, the inclusivity gap, vulnerable populations, indigenous people, and so on. Tourism is a huge sector. If we remember pre-pandemic figures, it will bounce back. We want to explore. We are curious by nature, and it'll come back.
Definitely, and that's obviously important for everyone to be on board with these goals, because especially when it comes to things like the environment, it's not going to do much good if it's just one person or one sector on that. But hopefully, as you said, that's something that we'll see in the near term, the achievement of these goals in terms of sustainability and obviously social development. And hopefully that aligns well with the emergence of from the pandemic of this sector that...
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And let's not forget, this is all the positive that tourism can do. But tourism is one of the friendly faces of globalization. And this is the important part. You can do good while having a good time and having an enriching experience. And an enriching experience means exactly that tourism is ideally positioned for. Getting to know each other, getting to explore and discover new cultures, new ways of living, and enriching your personal life. If properly managed, it's the proverbial win-win situation for the destination, for the communities, and for us as travelers. This is the main message, and this is why World Tourism Day is so important to us, and this is why we appreciate the opportunity of speaking to you on our observance day. It's our day on the calendar.
Well, that's really good to hear, and definitely agree with you. There's a lot of positivity that can come out of tourism, obviously, and hopefully the revival of the sector is sooner rather than later. But again, very well said, and thanks so much for sharing all those insights. It's been really great chatting with you, and thank you once again for taking time out of your busy schedule to chat with Cal.
Thank you, Holly.
Welcome back to Travel Insights on 𝐾𝐿 TV. Now to some news. International travel is high on the agenda for many Australians, but there's a lot we don't know about how it'll work, prompting calls from passengers and the aviation industry for clarity from the federal government. According to the national plan, when 90% of Australians are double vaccinated, there will be a gradual reopening of inward and outward international travel with safe countries, as well as proportionate quarantine and reduced requirements for fully vaccinated rebound travellers. Last week, Tourism Minister Dan Tehan said he hoped international borders would reopen by Christmas at the latest. However, airlines like Qantas are optimistic thanks to mercantilism, which would mean tickets to London, the UK, Singapore, Japan, and North America from mid-December. Others within the aviation trade are uncertain about their timeline and therefore the lack of clarity if the reopening can work at all. For example, the Board of Airlines Representatives of Australia Airports mentioned earlier that they were not resourced to handle extra international flights. On top of this, there has been restricted engagement with the industry from governments at the slightest level about arranging for a rise in services. The International Shipping Association, or AATA, which represents 82% of the world's airlines, has warned that some carriers could opt to fly elsewhere if the uncertainty continues. The Indian embassy in Rome has proclaimed that when a gathering control between the Minister of Health of India and his Italian counterpart, the Italian Ministry of Health has decided to recognize the Indian-made immunizing agent Covishield as valid proof of immunity. Consequently, this implies that unsusceptible people against the COVID-19 illness with the Covishield vaccine will currently enter Italy. Plus, everybody immunized with a jab is now eligible to get the Italian Green Pass, according to 𝐶henzhenVisaInfo.com. On top of that, access to restaurants, theaters, museums, sports events, swimming pools, amusement parks, gyms, and much more is restricted to solely people who prove that they need to be unsusceptible or recovered from the virus. On the flip side, the UK government's new international travel rules that don't recognise individuals vaccinated in Bharat are being called fully vaccinated has been blasted as offensive, bizarre, and interestingly enough, racist. The new rules mean people vaccinated in India can still have to be compelled to home quarantine for 10 days within the UK, once those vaccinated in many other countries will not. The White House Coronavirus Response Coordinator Jeff Zients revealed that the United States is working to create a system for international travel, which could consist of contact tracing. This means that by creating such a system, the US authorities will have access to coronavirus and other personal data of travelers in case they're exposed to the virus during the trip. Well, that's about all we have time for on this episode of Travel Insights, but join us next time to stay up to date with more of the latest travel news while we explore hot trends and destinations around the globe. See you